testing tool that's built in. And I've heard a lot of people say over the years that they can't afford to split test, as in have, 3 or 4 different variations of their ads, their calls to action, their copy, their images, even their landing pages and emails. But the truth is, you really can't afford not to split test, because more often than not, we actually don't really know what's going to perform the best until we test it out. And we're also all sort of bringing in some form of bias into our digital marketing work based on past experience. For me, for example, most of my past marketing experience within Facebook ads is largely a feminine, entrepreneurial, largely B2C space, for which pictures of happy people working on laptops and, calligraphy and soft pastel vibes, handwritten fonts, all of that stuff works really well. But then imagine I was bringing that bias into working with a property development client. I would be doing myself and them a massive disservice, because theirs is a space that would probably work more with images of properties and bold colors and bold fonts and kind of largely masculine feels and vibes. So the easiest way to really take our own biases out of this process is to assume nothing and split test everything. Because believe it or not, yes, split testing might cost you a little bit more upfront, but it's actually much cheaper for you to run in the long run when you compare that to putting money behind a strategy that's not converting for you, but you're sort of doing it anyway and assuming that more money is going to fix the problem in your foundation. So let's get into when you can and how you can split test within your Facebook ads process. You can split test or A/B test everything from your campaign objective to your audience variables within your ad sets, down to your ad creative, copy, and call to action variables, and even elements on your landing pages or within your emails. But the key with your split test will be to control as many variables as possible. That means that you should never be trying to test more than one variable at a time. Otherwise, you have no idea what's causing your campaigns to perform better or worse. And there's an ongoing debate with marketers as to the order of split tests that you should be performing. My personal tactic that I'm going to be taking you through is that if I'm starting with a completely blank account from scratch, or an account that hasn't been performing very well, then I first want to test my copy and creatives before then running my best performing ads to different audiences to test out which audiences work well for me. And a big reason for this is because first impressions really count. And if your audience is quite small, because maybe you're a local business or you have a really targeted niche audience, then this is a no-brainer, because you only want to be showing people your best performing ad content. So let's take a look at these steps, and then we'll also jump into Ads Manager and take a look at how we can go about implementing this. So once you have at least one cold audience that you have created and saved based on your research within your audience insights inside of Ads Manager, it's time then to split test your ads to this audience. And as I said, there's no perfect strategy for this. Other marketers might choose to test their copy first before their creatives. But for me, I found that testing different creative variations against each other is the best first step. And this is my chance to really try out 3 to 5 different creatives as a part of this test. So I could test an image, a video, a carousel, or maybe even this kind of custom GIF of myself to see what's performing best with this audience. Then let's say I find that my GIF performed the best for me. I could then run one additional split test that only tests variations of that GIF creative that worked really well in my previous round of testing, with different background colors, maybe different text options, and just trying different variations of this type of creative. Or let's say a video performs the best for me. Then I could actually go through and test different thumbnails of that same video. And I have linked this case study within your class guide as well, so make sure to check it out there. And it's an excellent example from Adespresso about what a difference a video thumbnail can actually make on your overall goals. So these guys were trying to get people to download the Soapbox app with this video. So they spent $250 per ad and found that even though this kind of cartoon looking thumbnail had higher initial click-through rate, the video retention was a lot higher, and the cost per acquisition of their actual customers and the cost per download of the app was a lot lower for people who are watching the videos with Adam's face on the thumbnail without text. So make sure to check out the full article in your class guide, but just know that something as small as just changing a thumbnail from something that's quite cartoony looking and it may be a little bit flat to an image of a human mid speech can potentially cut your costs in half, which is huge. Then, step two, after finding my best performing creative element, it's time for me to go and test out my copy. So, I found that the biggest thing that makes a difference in terms of split testing your copy is going to be length. So, I encourage you to try out one really short copy that is just 1 to 2 sentences, one medium length copy that's maybe 4 or 5 sentences, and then one long copy that might even be a couple of paragraphs or even longer, depending on how long the story is that you're maybe telling through this copy. And you would be doing all of these things with your winning creative element. So everything else stays the same. The only thing you're changing at this part of your split testing is the copy length. Then once again, you could break this step down one step further. If you find that maybe shorter copy works really, really well for your audience, you could run an additional test with using this short copy length, but maybe one with emojis and one without, and then maybe one that's still really short, but one with a slightly different version of that short copy. So you will probably find that your creative and your copy will make the biggest difference in terms of your split test. But if you do have a little bit more budget to play with and you want to run some more tests, then the next step would be for you to test some calls to action. So you could select one button to say learn more and another one to say sign up, like in this example here, or it can say shop now or download. And then you could go further to test a couple of different headlines. So, one could say, click through to get your free offer. One could say, hey, do you want to check out this free offer? And just slightly different variations at that stage. And then once that test is finished, you could then go through and test a couple of different descriptions that will appear below your headline. And also, as I said, in my opinion, this is not a part of your testing that will have the biggest impact. So don't worry if you don't have enough testing budget or time for this step. Also, because even though it's actually called a headline, it's not really a headline, is it? It appears after the copy and the image in our Facebook newsfeed in particular. So the headline may not make as much of a big difference in your split test for this reason, but your button CTA actually can make it quite a big difference. And in my opinion, if you're asking people to sign up for something or download something, then use the most appropriate button for this. And one thing to keep in mind as well is that not every campaign objective will have all of these buttons available. So keep that in mind, that if you're not seeing a button that you saw in your previous campaign, it could just be because you're using a different objective and Facebook is only giving you the options that are available for that campaign objective. Okay, so while step 3 is somewhat optional, step 4 is a must if you want to have great results. And the reason that I put this at step 4, not at the beginning, is because you will get the most out of your testing budget if you're able to test your audiences with the correct objective. And what I mean by that is that if you test your audiences first before you're testing out your creative and your copy and anything else, you would probably just be testing it with a low-cost campaign objective like traffic or engagement just to see what's performing well for you, because you wouldn't really want to be paying for conversions when you don't really have your best performing ads to use on these audiences yet. The problem with that is that you might find an audience that performs really, really well for a traffic or a video view objective because these are these sort of low-cost objectives. But when the time comes for you to actually put your best performing ads in front of this audience and get them to really sign up for something using your conversion objective, maybe you then find that it's actually really expensive or it doesn't quite work. So I really encourage you to test out your other assets first, fine-tune your ad creation process, and then once you have your best performing ad or a couple of ads, you can then run that same ad to 3 or more ad sets to see which of these is most responsive to your content and is actually performing the actions that you're optimizing for at this stage, which would be conversions and leads or webinar registrations or something that is really important to your sales cycle. Finally, I would also like to encourage you to split test what happens after someone actually clicks on your ad. So, have a couple of variations of your landing page, maybe a couple of different subject lines that you can test for your emails to see which ones get people to open their emails more or click on stuff more. But if that maybe seems a little bit too intimidating because there are a lot of different elements that you could change on your landing page in terms of color and headlines and call to action buttons and everything else, then I have a bit of a shortcut for this. I encourage you to install a heat map tool like Hotjar on your landing page. And I've included this inside of your class guide, and it's a free tool. And even on the free version, you can utilize some of the really cool features. So here's how it will look once you set up a couple of heat maps for your landing pages. And I can just jump in here. And this is one of the free offer or free trainings that I have where I've installed Hotjar. So I'm currently looking at desktop recordings, and I'm looking at clicks particularly. So I can actually look at where people are clicking on their desktops, and when I hover over it, it'll tell me exactly how many clicks that is. And I can pretty much see that really people are only sort of clicking on the places that I want them to click, which is exactly what we want. All right. And then if I just look at where they're moving, that's a whole different sort of heat map, because then I can see where their cursor was actually hovering over. So I can see, all right, they're actually checking out number 1 in what the free training will cover more than the other numbers. So can I make this my best tip? Because that seems to be where people are actually spending a bit of their time. And same with here. So that's where people are sort of moving around. And in terms of scrolling, this is going to become the important bit, because it will tell you where people are maybe tuning out. So I've got 100% of people who are making it to my embedded form, which is great. And that's exactly what I want. But then by the time they get to the bottom, there's only 38% of visitors that reach this point that were using desktop to access this landing page. So if maybe my embedded email form was actually the bottom, that's a problem, right? Because that means that 60% of people aren't even seeing it because they're not even scrolling that far. So that is exactly how I actually ended up moving it up here, because I realized that it was a little bit too far down, and it's actually the first thing I want people to see, and then a little bit of an explanation of what they're going to get. But some people are just ready to sign up straight away. They don't need to know what they're signing up for. And then you can go through and analyze how this is impacted on mobile devices and on tablets as well. And obviously, things are going to be a little bit different on mobile and on tablets. So you want to make sure you're going through and checking out exactly where your people are tapping, scrolling, and how they're moving through your page to really direct your future decisions about how to improve your landing pages. And in terms of actually running split tests within your ads manager, this is something that is constantly changing. And the current tools at the time of recording are not my favorite, but just so you know that there is a function for this, which is the A/B testing tool inside of ads manager. You do need to actually create a campaign and basically create it and publish it before you're able to run your A/B test. But at the campaign level, you'll be able to say, yes, I want to create an A/B test, and this is going to become our control campaign. And we can then split test that against one other campaign. So again, it doesn't allow you to sort of split test multiple campaigns at the same time. But I am going to show you my own manual way of doing this. So not my favorite, but just if you really do want to play around with this, you absolutely can. We would just go through just so I can show you what happens after you sort of create everything. Let's just say use existing posts, which means that we won't actually be able to split test anything on this level. And also we would want to make sure we are controlling our placement for our split test anyways. So we're not going to be using automatic placements. We want to be using manual placements, and we're only going to be split testing for the variable that we want to be split testing for. So this is really, really important, even though this is just a demo, but you want to make sure that when you're doing this, you're only split testing for one placement. And the newsfeed is my personal favorite just because it's really comprehensive and it's really easy to see what's working and what isn't. So I'd be happy to use this, and as soon as I hit publish, it's then going to walk me through some additional steps that I need to take in order to create my split test. So it's now saying select another campaign or create another campaign and select the variable that you want to be testing against. So again, I was using an existing post for this one. I wasn't creating it from scratch. So it's not able to use these as my split testing variable, but I can use a save audience, for example. And I can just go in here and select one of my other saved audiences to split test against. And then it's going to ask me for my total daily budget and also how long I want to be running this split test for. And based on what you put in here, it's going to give you a total estimated test power. If you hover over this, it's basically going to say you want to be aiming for at least 80% as your testing power in order to get the best results. So as soon as you sort of change this, whether you change your daily budget or you change the duration of your split test, it's then going to start giving you some different results here. Okay, so it clearly just wants too many things from me because this is an insane budget. That's unreasonable, which is why I don't usually go through their testing tool. And if you sort of run it for long enough, it's going to give you the green line. So yeah, this is going to give you a really good idea of which of your ad sets is performing the best. So if I create this, that's a lot of money. So I'm going to pause it very, very quickly because I didn't actually do anything in terms of my audiences. So I am going to go in here and make sure that that has been paused. But this is basically my A/B testing campaign, and it's got that initial ad set within it and then also my actual split testing one as well. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off, even though it's still in review, so there's no dramas. I would go and delete that. So that's one way to do it, and it will allow you to split test some things this way, but not enough, in my opinion. So my preference would be just for you to set your budget at the ad set level and then measure what's working and what isn't. And then also when you're testing your ad creative and copy, all you really have to do is go in and turn your ads on and off. So just go in and create an example campaign for this so we can have a look at a few things. The only thing I'm really worried about is restricting my placement at this stage so it doesn't give me some sort of weird, wonky suggestions for everything, because if I'm really running a true split test, then it just means that I want to be able to control my placement. So I'm going to be removing all this, and there's going to be some hidden ones in here for sure. Always. They're always going to try and make you advertise in as many places as possible, which is never good. So you want to be naming your ads based on whatever it is that you're split testing. But just for this purpose, I'm just going to label it ad 1. And this is going to be a split test of my ad creative. So I'm just going to select one ad creative here. Good with that. Text here. And this is optional and optional, so it doesn't really matter, but I don't think it's going to allow me to publish it unless I have a URL. So, cool. Awesome. Tracking, good. So all I would do with this, and I am going to turn it off before it sort of gets reviewed, but just so you know that this is how I would sort of perform a more manual split test. So I would go in here and say duplicate, and then it's going to ask you how many copies you want of this ad. And I'm going to say 4. All right, so then you just go in and customize them, swap out your creative, because that's the thing we're testing against. And that's it. Okay, so then you'd have ads 1 through 5. So I'm not going to go through and do all of them at this stage. But basically, they would all be different creatives or, different copies or whatever. You're only testing one thing at a time. But really, all I would do in that case is I would turn off all of them except for one. And so my ad set would have, let's say, $10 a day or $20 a day put towards it. But because I've turned the rest of these off, I'm only going to be running it towards this one ad. I would then let this ad get enough of a reach for me to determine some results. And also I want to make sure that the budget for all of these is going to be roughly the same. So I would let it get to 1,000 people reached, and then I would turn it off and turn on the next one. Turn it off, turn on the next one. Yes, it's a little bit more manual, but honestly, it's a lot better because you can essentially have all of your results in one place. So at the end of your split test, you'll be able to come in here and go, okay, I spent $10 in this one, $10 in this one, and how has that performed for me? So ideally, minimum 1,000 people reached not impressions, but reach, and you want to have between 4 to 7 results. Then once that test is done, you could continue building this out and go, all right, this is my best performing creative. Now I'm going to test copy, and then I'm going to test my calls to action, and keep doing that. If you are a little bit sick of manual labor and you do want to make this at least somewhat optimized and automated, just select the ad that you have turned on and jump into automated rules. Now, I've already got a rule for this, but let's just go into how to create it. And you would basically give the rule a name and say, apply this to the one ad that's selected, turn it off once the amount spent on the ad is more than $10. And I'll just add that in. And you could change the range. You can also change so many different variables, so it doesn't have to go by spend. You could say once it's reached 1,000 people, turn it off. But that will really help you to stay on track with making sure that everything is sort of working really smoothly for you, and then you can just come in here and turn on your next one. It's also going to send you an email and a notification when it runs your rule. And then once you save this rule, then you'll actually be able to have it as a rule for you to actually apply for your next ad. So then all that means is that Facebook is going to turn this off for you as soon as 1,000 people are reached or it's spent enough money. And then all you'd have to do is come in here, turn on the next one, and then you can say apply existing rule. And automated rules are something I really encourage you to explore because there's a lot of really good stuff here in terms of managing frequency. So you can actually make it automated, especially if you have a lot of ads going on at any one time outside of your testing phase, even when you're already running live campaigns and you really want Facebook to help you out a little bit in terms of turning your ads off when your frequency reaches above, 5 or 6, because it's then getting to that danger point where people are seeing your ads a little bit too frequently. You can actually just set a rule for that, and you don't just have to apply it to a specific ad. You can apply it to a specific campaign or ad set, or you can apply it to all your active campaigns or ad sets. So definitely play around with some of the automated rules. It can be a really good way to streamline your process.